Just as the pandemic panic began to taper down, global geopolitical conflicts have begun to emerge as a menace that threatens to immerse the world in World War III. The COVID-19 pandemic had already dented global trade and amplified existing logistic challenges around the world. Lockdowns triggered rapid growth in e-commerce, putting additional strain on already strained freight networks. Also, given the dire humanitarian need, the distribution of vaccines worldwide was a topmost priority for governments and the logistic industry alike. Logistics firms have been witnessing a myriad of challenges back-to-back for the last few years. Just when we began settling into 2022 with hopes of normalcy, Russia's invasion of Ukraine threatened to further disrupt that already fragile supply chain. The global nightmare turned to reality in 24 February when Russian troops invaded the Ukraine border by land, sea and air. Apart from life, this destruction invasion has had a cascading impact on logistics and communities at large. In this episode of Logistically Speaking, we will talk about the impact generational war has on the world. The Russia-Ukraine crisis is one of the most challenging disruptions that the logistic and supply chain industry has faced in recent years. Ukraine represents 200 million tons of transit potential, and it won't be audacious to say that Ukraine is one of the foremost yet often overlooked components of both the European and global supply chain. But the Russian invasion has resulted in shutting down port operations in Ukraine, leading to disruption of important shipping routes. Several global logistics and freight transportation services providers have been forced to stop services into and out of Ukraine. Logistically speaking, it is imperative to consider how supply chain business can explore routes that evade the area of conflicts without overlooking the geopolitical risks. Let's start by understanding some of the chief impact of this war. Number one, longer transportation route. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has resulted in an economic war between the West and Russia, leading to airspace restriction being imposed. Routes across Russia between Asia and Europe are brief and advantageous for many airlines in terms of flying time and fuel consumption. Being a region of warfare, bypassing the Russian route has become imperative, resulting in fluctuation between the north and the south through Middle East and up to southern Europe, tending to be complex, inefficient and expensive. Ukraine is fundamentally a key link due to its location in both the global land and sea route. But due to the current situation, route restrictions are adding major logistical complexities and forcing carriers to take lengthier route to avoid the possibility of any missile strike. Number two, restriction on semiconductor production. Already in a crisis, the Russia-Ukraine war has piled further pressure on the global supplies of steel and commodities used in semiconductor production such as neon gas and palladium. Ukraine produces 70% of the global supply of neon, while Russia contributes over 40% of the world's supply of palladium. The global chip shortage is expected to worsen if this war ceases to stop. This is going to hurt the already bruised logistics business, electronic device producers, phone manufacturers, and many other sectors that are increasingly reliant on chips for their manufacturing. Number three, hike in fuel and shipping prices. The invasion has triggered fuel prices to surge to an 8-year high of $105 per barrel. The prices is up by nearly 60%, and rising fuel cost will adversely impact the manufacturing and logistics sector as the extra fuel burned on circuitous routes will come at a much higher price. Logistics business owners are faced with tough decision about which load they can carry to capitalize on their fuel inventory as costs continue to escalate. Number 4. Freight capacity. Freight capacity is one of the foremost challenges logistics and supply chain establishments are struggling to resolve. The war has led to reduced cargo capacity, while air transporters are still catching up from the pandemic-linked decline in passenger travel. The primary losers are transporters with heavyweight and outsized cargo that won't fit well in regular cargo jet. Conditions are expected to become more challenging in the coming weeks as demand continue to rise. Number 5. Energy crisis. A huge energy catastrophe seems to be stemming from the emergency. For example, as pipelines and sea routes are being disrupted and more pressure falls on land-based freight to keep energy supply chain moving, logistic providers are having trouble keeping up with demand. And while Russia is waging war on Ukraine, the truckers' protest in Canada has already begun straining a weakened logistics sector. Canada sent 75% of its goods export to the US. The Ambassador Bridge between Windsor border and Detroit border usually handle 8,000 trucks a day, representing a quarter of all cross-border trade amounting to 393 million per day. The truckers' protest in Canada disrupted these two key US border crossings while snarling hundreds of millions of dollars daily in trade ranging from cattle to car parts. The most problematic issue for manufacturers is not just aligning vehicular logistics, but also keeping track of documentation required to move material across the border that keeps changing. The logistic industry in this case have to evaluate air routes to find substitute for moving goods caught up in Canadian trucking protests, resulting in damaged supply chain on both sides of the US-Canada border. Air freight rates started to rise again because of the lack of available aircraft, along with the possibility of more flight suspensions. To summarize, the risks and challenges faced by the logistic industry have shifted from pandemic to geopolitical conflict, resulting in economic uncertainties on a global scale. Due to longer transportation route, freight limitation, hike in fuel prices, semiconductor crisis in Europe, while truckers protest in Canada-US border has made the logistic business an extremely challenging one. Logistics labor cannot be regarded as a mere commodity anymore. Standardized technology and innovation to this essential workforce is long overdue. Well, I hope you found today's episode informative. For more such information, subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you again next week. Thank you.